James, could you give me a little overview of your career?
I always wanted to be an illustrator, but I soon found out very early on that I was never going to be good enough.
Yeah.
But then I understood story very well, and I love film, so I did a lot of study on story techniques and principles of story and everything else. But with my drawing skills, I became a storyboard artist, and then from there I got into college, and then I discovered animation. And I never actually wanted to be an animator, I always wanted to be an illustrator, but then when I discovered animation, it just made sense to me, and I was a much better animator than I ever was going to be as an illustrator, which is great. And then when I left college, I went into commercials, and then from commercials went into games, and then from games went into film.
So you did it all. And what do you look for in animation?
For me, it's all about weight.
Yeah.
For me, it's all about weight and real-world physics. I do real-world physics pretty easily, and so a lot of the shots that I've got, you probably see on my reel, there's Kong where he throws a car and the car bounces through the streets. They weren't simulations. That was me actually animating Kong picking up a car and throwing it and it bouncing and it hitting another car and then another car hitting it. And it just makes sense to me. And so when I look at animation, I want to know that the weight and the transference of weight is working from a mechanical level. But ultimately what I'm really looking for is story and connection and character and humanity. I know it sounds contrite, but it really is that if you can engage an audience, because the big thing is, if you're watching something and someone has actually created something, they have to think about it like, this is what I care about it, and this is why I'm doing it. But at the same time, it's, why should anyone else give a shit? Because there's nothing worse than sitting and watching a movie that's incredibly self-indulgent. It's like, I've just wasted an hour and a half of my life. And it, on a smaller scale, that when you're looking at animation work and you're looking at student work, and they do, and it's all about weight and timing, and they're getting all the weight and timing right, but there's no soul, there's no connection, there's no empathy, there's no emotion in it. It's like, well, it's a waste of my time.
So how do you approach your animation to make sure that you have those points in the final product? Do you use reference? Do you thumbnail? What's your process?
Well, the first thing I do, before I get to any of that stuff, you have to think about why. Everything comes back down to why. And so whether or not it's... And there was a shot that I did for Prince Caspian, where a giant, and it's in the final battle sequence, and the giant reaches across, grabs a guy on a horse. And so he grabs the guy on the horse gets frightened and takes off, and then he spins around and then throws the guy through the air. And he cartwheels through the air, and then he hits another guy on another horse. And it's an action shot, right? But I still had to think about it. Why is he so angry? What's he trying to do? And his home's being attacked, and these guys are killing all the creatures, all the fairy creatures and what have you in his world. And so he's incredibly angry. And so it's not like, it all affects the way that he grabs someone, and it affects the way that he yanks them out and then throws them, in the way that they pirouette through the air. Is it going to be an elegant thing? Is it going to be incredibly violent? Is it, and it all affects the way that he twists his hips and what's on his face and his body posture. So you have to start with why, because if you don't start with why, then all you're doing is just mechanics.
Yeah.
And it's not really animating. What it is it's mechanics. So then you have to start with why, and then understand, why is this creature doing this? Why is this character doing this? And then, are they lost? Are they happy? Are they sad? And that will affect and then dictate how he's going to move and what he's going to do.
I know you've got a certain workflow of using constraints and changing the parenting.
Yep.
Could you explain it to me a little?
The thing that I learned doing a lot of previs is that things change. Things are always changing. And it's really important to understand what is being connected to what. And then if I need to disconnect this node from this parent node. Where is it sitting? Where is it connected? What's the key points? And so I set up a system that basically means that as an object, as a single object, here it is, it has a parent node. And it's that parent node that continually gets connected to different objects. So that if you want to go back and see the lineage of it, you go back to the one node, and that gets connected all the way. As opposed to, you connect this thing to that, and then this thing gets connected to that, and this thing gets connected to that, and all of a sudden you're not too sure where the chain finishes and when the chain starts. And it's really breaking everything down into its component parts, so that when I'm animating, and you saw the flight rig that I did. So the flight rig that I do, one node connects, or should I say one node is responsible for one action, whether that's X or Y translate, or X or Z translate, and then I get another one that's a Y translate. So therefore I can move one node across the ground like this, and I can get another node and do this. And it doesn't matter. All I need to do is pull this node, the translate node, backwards and forwards, and the arc will self-correct, as opposed to doing it all on the one thing.
Yeah.
And if something goes wrong, I know exactly where it's gone wrong because I can see where it's gone wrong, or needs to change, or whatever it may be. But that took a while to actually develop.
Yeah.
And so, and that thing for Kong, when he's throwing the cars, every single time a car hits the ground, every single time a portion of the car hits a surface, that's a new translate node or a new rotate node, and the rotate nodes are placed around the car like this, and it just bang, 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 bang. And it's very easy for me to do this, but then also change the translation across the ground so that it bounces and jigs and jags and makes it easy.
So you use the points of contact as rotating axis?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. And you've worked on the Hobbit, you've worked on Madagascar 3, you've worked on How to Train Your Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
They are really different projects.
Yes.
Did your way of working changed? Or did you approach the project differently, since it is not the same style, it's not the same director, it's not the same studio?
That's a good question. I think I have a workflow. My workflow doesn't change. My workflow really doesn't change. And it's a very efficient and very streamlined workflow. And that is, I spend a lot of time at the front setting up properly, because I know that later on I'm going to have to change stuff. So I know I need to find all of my bits and pieces very quickly. And if you have a systemized workflow, it also means that you can build things up, you can build things in layers, and you can augment them and change them as you see fit, because you understand what's driving what. And that doesn't change whether or not you're doing a character piece, or you're doing an action piece, or you're doing a cartoony piece. The system itself doesn't change. It's the application of the system that varies. And it's also good for a director, and this was for Madagascar. I had a system, and so I'd come in and I'd show them, and they would go, okay, so this guy can change his work quickly. Right, got it, okay. Therefore we can do more things with it, and they feel more comfortable with you, you have more confidence in your own work, and everyone's happy. But if every single time you go to the board and you're like, how did I do that thing again? Okay, so I did this, and I can't remember what I did in that last thing, and it slows you down, and then people are like, where's that thing I asked you for? And then people start questioning you, and it's so you have to have a system.
And how do you stay inspired as an artist?
Well, I'll actually refer to Zerply on this one and say the best part about my day, now that I'm working full-time on Zerply, the best part about my day is the 45 minutes when I first get in and I look through all of the reels and all the shots and everything that people have added the night beforehand. And it gives me goosebumps. It gives me goosebumps because the guys on there are phenomenally good. And I stay inspired by just looking at fantastic work. And the stuff we get every single day, it humbles me, and it's absolute privilege to have these people trusting you with their work and you with their babies. I get inspired every single day. It's fucking fantastic.
You're doing Previz now.
Mm-hmm.
You did animation before.
Mm-hmm.
Previz is a whole different thing. I
Mhm.
mean, yes, you animate, but you need to create the cameras. You
Mhm.
need to determine the story.
Yeah.
You need to edit, basically. How did you learn all of this? How did you become a lead out of starting in animation?
Well, I started out in storyboarding.
Oh yeah, that's
So that's always a great place to start, because you're already starting out with a lens in mind. So you're already looking at things from the perspective of, this is the camera and this is why I'm viewing something, and this is what the character is about. And so you're already asking those questions from the beginning. And I worked with Peter Jackson for 6 months. So he tells you pretty quickly about your cameras. And he also tells you why you want to be using these cameras, and why this one doesn't work, and why he's choosing that. And so you start out in Previz and you do all this work, and then Pete comes in and says, okay, that's great, and then he changes it all, and then you go and you change it, and then he comes in and says, that's great, and he changes it all, and so you change it, and then you get all these cameras, and you put in all the cameras, and you do all these rough edits and everything else. And then what he does is he takes all that information, puts it down on the motion capture stage, and then basically does a fly-through of it, and then all the cameras that you've chosen, he may or may not use, and he may or may not critique to a lesser or greater degree. But then afterwards, you go back and you see it on the final show, and it's completely different to what you asked for, what you proposed. I mean, but he
compared with Dean DeBoer, and it was the complete opposite.
And it was a complete opposite.
A sequence from How to Train a Dragon 2. It's almost frame per frame the exact same thing you did.
Exactly. So Pete really loves his cameras, and he knows why he's doing it, and he'll tell you, he'll be very specific about it, and so you go off and you do the changes that you're told to do. But then that does not necessarily mean he's going to use them.
Where was your way of working with Dean DeBoer instead?
With Dean, he was one of those guys who came in and just said, look, let's have a look at your stuff, and you basically pitched your stuff and you showed it. And he, at that level, at that point and at that level, I was starting from a much stronger position, and I knew my stuff a lot more. And so even the first passes that I was putting through, because you start with strong storyboards. And so you start as a Previz artist with really strong foundations. And then from those strong foundations, you then have to bring your A game, and you have to start showing some stuff that's really good. And so you spend the time on getting the composition right. You spend the time on really thinking about, why is the camera here? What's it trying to say? What are you trying to show? What's the emotional connection between you, the audience, and what you're viewing? And if you do a good job of that, Dean just goes, great, nicely done, next. Which is really, really satisfying from an artist's perspective. And certainly he'll change some things and what have you, but he has a very good eye, and the changes that he made were all very good, and the changes that he made were all very subtle, but he made them when he needed to, and he extended out a couple of shots, he shortened a couple of shots, but they're pretty much what I did. But at that point, you have trust, and the director trusts you, and you trust the director. And it was wonderful. It was actually one of the best experiences in my entire professional career on How to Train Your Dragon 2. It was just wonderful. And those guys are good guys. They all know what they're doing. Everyone comes in with their A game, and basically everyone's just plussing it every single time. They're plussing it and plussing it and plussing it. And then your job as the Previz artist is not to tie down the animators.
Yeah.
But give them really good direction. Give them all of the emotive beats. Give them the intent of the shots. So they go, got it, great, understand, now what more can I do? And that's your role as a Previz artist.
What was your best shot project in your career? The one you're really proud of?
There's one shot on Kong, and it's the third or fourth shot on my reel now, but where King Kong is going through the streets in New York, and he's boom, 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 like this, and he's got the cab, and he throws the cab, and this is one I was explaining before, where it bounces and rolls, and dunk, 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 and hits, and I worked really hard on that shot, and I got that shot because I did some work with another shot that wasn't very good, but every shot you get do the very best you can on it. And every shot you get, you need to squeeze the juice out of it. You need to plus it. And if they ask for a bouncing car, give them a bouncing car with something that hits it and it pops it at the end. It doesn't just go boom, 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 right? That's nothing. It's crap. Someone goes, give me a bouncing car. Great. So you bounce it off the walls and you bounce it off something and you make it hit something else. That's what I did. And then from that, they gave me this shot. I worked really hard on it, and then it got omitted from the movie. And I thought, I can never put in my reel. That sucks. And then when I was at the cinema, I'm sitting around and I'm watching with all my friends, and Sam, my wife, is sitting there. And the shot comes on, and it's right there. And I was like, what? And they played it from the handles. So they used all the handles of it as well. And it was the biggest surprise, and I was so proud of it. And I got to see it, and now it's on my reel. And that was, I was really chuffed with that one.
What was your greatest obstacle in your career? Your greatest defeat, let's say. And how did you overcome it?
I've been lucky because I've actually planned out a lot of the things I've wanted to do, and I've achieved most of the things I wanted to do, and I've worked at most of the companies where I wanted to work. The biggest obstacle hasn't been finding work, and the biggest obstacle hasn't been getting connected. It's actually been on the job when you're working with someone and you don't like them, and their creative sensibility is different to yours, and their personal ethos is different to yours, and the way they talk to people is most certainly different to the way that you talk to them. And if they're disrespectful and they're malicious, and I work with people like that, very few, but I've worked with people like that, and it's very, very tough. How you overcome it, I'm still working on that one.
You try to remain professional, right?
yeah, exactly. You try and remain as professional as you possibly can, and and then afterwards, when you're having beers with some friends, then you can tell them what you really think. But you have to be professional. You have to be professional.
Yeah, and what is next for you?
Next for me?
Yeah, next. What are your plans? What are you trying to achieve in the near future?
Well, the next thing that I really want to do is I actually want to make... It's... Like I said, I've done most of the things I want to do in animation. I've done most of the things I want to do in my career. And I've worked with some really great people. And what I really want to do now is I want to help other people. And the whole reason why I'm doing... I've basically left the industry on a permanent basis is to take 2 jobs a year to work on the projects I want to work on with the people I want to work with. And then the rest of the time, create something that actually helps and changes people's lives, and that takes the fear out of the industry and takes the uncertainty out of freelancing, and gives the artists a sense of community, and then also a sense of support and appreciation for their talent and what they do. We work in an industry where there are people who are nameless, faceless artisans who are creating modern mythology that is being enjoyed by countless millions of people around the world. And no one knows who they are. And it kills me that these people are completely underappreciated, and they are working at a level that is second to none. And that if you were to do a sporting analogy, these guys are the major league pitchers. And these guys are the people starring on the basketball courts, and it's the 1%ers of the people who want to do it, who actually get there, who are actually doing it, and no one gives a shit about them. And I want to change that. I want to change that so that those people, I can help them find where they want to go, help them fulfill their dreams, but more importantly, take away the fear and the uncertainty out of their lives. That's what I want to do.
Great. And I wish you the best, because it's a good idea.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you for taking the time with me, man.